Hey, I'm Meggie Kay. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about planning a trip and specifically what I do in my trip planning process. And there's lots of ways to plan a trip and there's no really like a wrong way. You do whatever works for you. But if you're kind of new to travel and you haven't really planned out a longer trip, this might help you do that. And specifically I'm talking about like, week-long visiting multiple cities kind of trip. It's a lot easier if you like just go to a country and you're kind of just like staying in one city and like exploring around the city. But if you want to like travel around to different cities, it does take a little bit of extra planning and a couple extra things you need to take into consideration. So we're gonna be talking about that today. And yeah, I've kind of broken this down into like 4 different steps. So let's just get into step number 1. Research. Research is step number 1. And this kind of goes for any kind of trip you ever do anywhere, whether you're staying in your home country or you're going halfway across the world, you need to do some research. So there's a couple of different things you need to do research on. The first is where? Where are you gonna go? You need to know where you're gonna go and you need to know why you wanna go there. What do you wanna do there? What do you wanna see? The next thing you need to research is how long. This is for how long of your total trip, like how many days. Are you going for a weekend? Are you going for a week? Are you gonna go for 3 months? How long is your trip? And the other thing you need to research in terms of how long is how long are you gonna stay in each place. So if you're going on a longer trip, like we're talking about in this video, and you're gonna visit multiple cities, you need to know within each place, how long are you gonna stay in each one? How long will it take to see the different things and do the different things that you want to see and do in each place? And that will kind of add up into the total trip, but you need to figure out both of those in your research. The last thing you need to research is transportation. So the transportation to get to the place that you're gonna go, and then if you're going through multiple cities, you need to know how to get between those. So is it gonna be a road trip? Is it gonna be train travel? Do you need to fly both internationally and domestically? Are there other ways? You need to research to see which is the most practical option for wherever you wanna go. So the next step is to organize everything, all your research, and you gotta get specific with it now. And for that, what I like to do is to write it all down on a piece of paper and like, I'm a list person. I like making lists about stuff. So this is just like a scrap piece of paper from my school, which, side note, I feel like Japanese schools, their goal is to destroy trees, and like educating the population is just a side product of that. They use way too much paper there. So I got lots of like little pieces of paper to plan trips on. This paper also has a coffee stain because this is my life. But this is what I did to plan out my trip that I did to like Kyoto, Tottori, and Hyogo, which I just posted all of those videos, even though it was back in September. I had a backlog of videos. They're just getting up now. But this is what I used to plan it, and basically we're gonna be looking at this side of the paper first. Now we are going to ignore this side of the paper. That's for later. And just look over here. So this is kind of like my organizing bit, and we're also, sorry, we're gonna ignore this little like coffee spill. But yeah, so first I have all of the dates here and then what's happening on those days. So September 15th, board the boat at 7:30 p.m. and that's it, that's the day. September 16th, arrive Kobe at 7:55 a.m. and train to Kyoto. Then this one, there's no train, there's no leaving, it's just sightseeing. So on the 18th, I specifically put in the train to Amanahashidate, AM departure. So just sometime in the morning, I needed to get on the train to Amanahashidate because I wanted the afternoon for sightseeing. And then on the 19th, again, I put in the specific times of a train because this was the last possible one I needed to take, because the arrival's 8:15, and I don't like arriving in a destination super late, but that way the morning I could do sightseeing, then in the afternoon, the train. So again, just sightseeing. And then September 21st, train to Himeji, 8:30 departure is the like ideal train. It wasn't set in stone, but I wanted to arrive late morning, so I just kind of added that in. And then sightseeing, and I wrote the train to Kobe in the PM because that's where I was staying. Then again, just sightseeing, board the boat, and arrive. And there's the general schedule for my trip. So yeah, this is a good general like organizing how the trip is gonna go. So when I get into the booking stage, I can like know 1 night here, 2 nights there without really thinking or second guessing the dates or how many nights. I have it all kind of really well organized in this little list. Okay, so step 3 is to budget. Figure out your budget. How much is this trip gonna cost? And I've gotten to this part of my trip planning quite a few times, and I'm just like, yep, I can't afford this. This is like adding up to be a bit too much. Things are a bit too expensive. I'm gonna have to wipe this trip off the board. So budgeting is very, very important. And another thing about budgeting you should really consider is rounding up. Always round up. When you're getting these like general numbers to kind of figure out how much about something will cost, round up. And the reason for this is that it's always better to have extra money at the end of the trip, you know, pocket it, buy an extra souvenir, put it towards your next trip you want to do, than to like get somewhere and be really tight on money and not really be able to afford the things you want to do. Just when you're in the planning stage, you're looking at general prices, always round these up and you'll be good to go. If an unexpected cost comes up, you're still fine. And it's always better to be in that kind of situation than to be like struggling with money when you're on a trip. All right, so we're back down to this paper and this is where this side, so we have the schedule here, we know that. And then over here, it's broken down into a few couple points. So here we have the transportation. So I got these numbers, like the boat I got in like the boat's website, I figured out it'd be around 30,000 yen. So I wrote that. Again, this is rounded up. It wasn't quite that much, but it's better to budget too much money than not enough. And again, these numbers here were rounded from Google. Now you might not be able to find the prices for every country about, you know, trains or buses or whatever, but for Japan at least, Google does put the price when you like just search your destinations. But any like train or bus website should give you the prices. So I put those there, and then again I just rounded it up to this much. So it's 43,600 and I rounded up to 44,000. And then for accommodation, for this I just go onto any kind of like booking website. I actually use booking.com. And I look at the kind of room or the kind of accommodation I want, whether you want a hotel or hostel, it really doesn't matter. But look at like what your standards are, what you want, and kind of just take a random like average, what most of them come out to be. And I wrote that down again for 2 nights, 1 night, 2 nights, 2 nights. And that came out to roughly that much. And again, food and sightseeing, just like random numbers. So I got my total estimate budget for the entire trip for 126,000 yen. Now, I did not pay this much money for the trip. It was definitely less than that because everything here is rounded up. So it would not cost this much. It did not cost this much. But the fact that I have that and it's rounded up and I'm for sure not gonna go over that, but I am still okay with paying that much money, we're good to go, okay? And, you know, like I said, sometimes I'll get to this point and be like, oops, can't do that. And actually, I think I'm gonna show you, for example, my over budgeting. Okay, so just to show you what I mean by rounding up and like I did not pay this much money, we'll go into like my bookings for the actual accommodation. So I estimated 10,000 yen for the 2 nights in Kyoto. What I actually paid was only 6,677. So it was quite a bit less than this. And let's see, what else? Next, for Amano Hashidate, this one I wasn't quite right. I was a bit under. But again, because I round everything up, this extra 500 yen, 600 yen, it doesn't matter. What's next? Okay, in Tottori, I said about 8,000 for my estimate, and I actually paid 7,200. So again, pretty close on that one. And last in Kobe, I put 8,000 for the 2 nights, and I actually only paid 5,000. So yeah, that's what I mean by like, these are just estimates, and I'm always rounding up, and I'm always kind of putting a little extra onto this just to make sure that I don't run out of money on a trip. So the last thing to consider that I didn't put on this sheet because it wasn't part of this trip is any kind of extra things you might want to do. So there have been times when shopping was a big part of my trip. I was like, I'm gonna go shopping, I'm gonna buy a lot of stuff because where I live, there's not really much here. Also, if there's any like big ticket activities you wanna do, you wanna make sure you put that specifically into your budget. So I put 20,000 yen on here for sightseeing, but like most of the things I wanted to do were like, you know, go to a museum, go into the temples, go, you know, to the castle, which usually are, you know, $10 kind of entrance fees. There wasn't anything like a big ticket item. So like when I went to New Zealand, some of the really popular things there are to go skydiving or bungee jumping and, you know, stuff like that, which are well over $100 if you want to do. Those are expensive activities. So if you're going to a place and that's on your radar, if you want to do something like that, put that rough estimate, round it up into your budget to make sure that you can afford it when you go there. Also, if you want to do like a specific day tour, like when I went to Seoul, I wanted to do a tour to the DMZ. And so I actually booked that ahead of time. But like, again, when you're figuring out your budget, put those big ticket items in here too. But this trip didn't have any, so last point there. The final step is to book. You have your plan, you have your budget, you're good with everything, and now you can start booking stuff. So there is a little bit of an order you might want to consider booking in, even though it doesn't actually matter. The first thing you want to consider is your big transport. So if you need to fly to the location you're going to travel around in, you need to book that first. Generally speaking, the earlier you book a flight, the cheaper it's going to be. So you kind of want to get on that as soon as like you're sold completely on the idea of going on a trip. You want to get your flight booked if you need a flight. You might not. For this trip, I took a boat, and that boat, you could only book like 3 months in advance at the earliest. And those prices don't change ever, so it doesn't really matter as long as, you know, you get your seat. The next thing you want to consider booking is your accommodation, your hotels or hostels or whatever you want to do. Now, when traveling around Japan, I've noticed that like around a month is probably the latest you want to book a hotel or accommodation because things do tend to sell out. But in other places, like when I traveled around Southeast Asia, you know, from Singapore, we would buy a ticket to Thailand for the weekend and just show up and walk and like, hey, do you have a room? How much is it? And then you go to the next place and ask them, and then you like kind of figure out which one you feel like. And you don't book it in advance. And that's just kind of like the backpack culture of Southeast Asia. You can just do that. It's a thing. Whereas like in Japan, I don't really think that's a common thing to do. And you know, they do book out. So you don't want to be like stuck somewhere and not be able to find a place to stay, even though like you can usually work it out. There's like love hotels around Japan and whatnot. But the other thing to consider is that if you're going to a like smaller town or more rural area, there might not be a lot of options. So again, you probably want to consider booking that to make sure you have a place when, you know, the 2 hotels in town get booked out completely and you're kind of stuck there. You don't want that to happen. Especially if you're new to travel, you might want to just like book a place and not have to worry about it. Don't have that anxiety on your back kind of thing. So yeah, hotels would be the second thing to look at booking. And the last thing is small transportation and activities. In Japan, like all these train trips that I took, I didn't book them in advance. I just kind of showed up, bought my ticket, got on the train. And in Japan, that's kind of how it works. However, like when I went to Taiwan, I did book all of those trains in advance because one, I read online that certain popular routes can potentially book up. And I didn't want to hit that snag. As well, I was traveling over a holiday period. So again, other like locals might be trying to get places. And again, I didn't want to deal with like showing up there and not being able to book a train because they're all booked up and I get stuck somewhere. So yeah, consider potentially booking small transportation if you think you need to, and activities. So like when I went to Seoul and I did the DMZ tour, I went online and I looked at all the different kind of tour companies and stuff like that to see whether I, you know, well, which one I wanted to take, because I knew like going to the DMZ was a big thing for me, one thing I really, really wanted to do. So I was looking at the different kinds of tours available and I found one I liked. And, you know, day trips and tours are things you should really look into booking in advance. I mean, typically you can book it in country as well, but maybe they sell out or it's not available on the day you want. But it's just another thing you should consider booking, maybe, if you want to. Alright, so that's it for this video. That is how I plan my trips. I'm pretty sure I got everything. I don't think I forgot a step or any kind of like important detail. If I did, let me know in the comments. But yeah, if you're new to travel and you're still trying to figure out how to plan a trip yourself, hopefully this video was helpful for you. And yeah, I think that's everything I need to say. And I will see you in the next video. So bye.